Hello, and welcome to Purina's series, Livin the Farm Life. We know the passion you have for caring for animals and for the life you live on your property, and also what it means to you and your family. At Purina, we do the same thing every day at our 1,300-acre Animal Nutrition Center in Gray Summit, Missouri. This is where we develop the latest in nutrition and care for over 7,000 animals annually across all major species, and have since 1926. It's also how several of us choose to live our lives. So we want to connect with you through the upcoming episodes that what we do here at our farm can help you enjoy and have success on yours. Now let's get started as we share our farm with you and we all enjoy living the farm life.
Hello everyone, we're here in Gray Summit, Missouri. We're living the farm life. On this episode, we're going to discuss coop management, design, and things of that nature. I'm Dr. Patrick Biggs. I'm the flock nutritionist for Purina. With me is AJ Lee.
I am the manager here at the companion animal unit at the Purina Animal Nutrition Center.
All right, so AJ manages all this stuff. He does a lot of the day-to-day care of the chicken. So we're gonna have a conversation. We're certainly gonna talk about kind of what it takes to design a coop, manage the coop, so give you an idea of what you're gonna do on a daily basis when it comes to raising this coop. So the first thing we want to kind of talk about is really the space that you're gonna need for these chickens. You see here we've got this big building here. This is really the coop. We have this outside area over here would be the run area. A lot of times you want to know how many feet you need, how much space do your chickens need, and which is really one of the big things why chickens are quite popular with the backyard communities, because you don't need a lot of space for those birds. About 10 square feet of space is really what we say for those chickens. And we divide that up even further into kind of how much space do you need for the coop and the run. It's about 2 to 3 square feet per chicken in the coop area. And then out in the run, we give them a whole lot more space, 7 to 8 square feet out there. We want to keep that coop area actually pretty small. That helps the birds kind of deal with the colder weather. So if you do live somewhere where it does get pretty chilly, keeping that coop sized appropriately for those birds is actually going to benefit them, because they're going to generate enough body heat in the winter. We can close up the doors, the windows. They can retain a lot of that heat in there, so it helps them stay nice and warm. And then the run area, obviously 7 to 8 square feet is kind of a minimum that we recommend. You can certainly go bigger than that if you want to. And two, I know a lot of you, when it comes to the cold weather, you're certainly going to be concerned about your chickens. We've had some cold weather. Yeah. I mean, over the last winter. Some
minus sub-zero temperatures.
Sub-zero temperatures. So. And, we don't do a whole lot for these birds as far as keeping them warm. We do the basics, try and keep the coop as dry as possible, keep the birds out of the wind as much as possible, and food and water. And, did we have issues when it got cold?
We had zero issues. Like you said, just keep the doors shut, windows down, and keep the drafts out of there. And then we've had zero issues. Of course, we keep waters from freezing and always have food available too.
Right, yeah, and we'll talk about that when we move down to the run area and look at those things.
Right, so we're in the time of year where ventilation is important, though.
All right.
So as you can see, we've got the doors open. Our coop has got several windows on it. All the 4 sides have windows, and then we've got vents in the top too.
Vents in the top. And then the other thing to notice, wherever there's a door or a window, we want this wire. We want to make sure we're using hardware cloth, welded wire, something a little sturdier than chicken wire, right?
Yeah. Chicken wire tends to stretch.
Right.
Critters can get their arms in there, so we like the hardware cloth.
Right, and even with windows that already have screens, we want to make sure that we put more wire behind that. You can see in the windows that we've got here that we've actually reinforced them. We've got a wire screen behind those as well.
Over this.
So that as you open those windows, it's certainly going to keep those predators out, because a screen is not going to be strong enough to keep somebody who's determined to get in and make lunch out of your chickens out. What else we got going on in here?
Sure. So some other things inside the coop. We use just a pine shavings. We've tried several different things, sand, a real fine sawdust, but we like this kind of mixture of big and small shavings. It's absorbent. The chickens can scratch around in it. We use the same thing in their nest boxes, and you can see those nest boxes are all filled with shavings. And then we have roosts in here, so our roosts are inside our coop. We just use a 2x4, so we don't use anything round. A lot of people tend to use something round, and then we keep them all the same level. So one thought behind keeping them all the same level is you don't have birds fighting to get higher on the roost. So other than that, in here we do have a door, chicken door. It has a sliding door if you want to lock everybody inside and then work outside, or if you keep your run open and you want to lock them in at night, we can do that too.
Right.
So
yeah, and the nest boxes, you know, we typically think about a 12-inch cube is really what, you know, the size of that nest box. Sure. And you know, these coops are large enough that we can get inside, and so those are nice because you can get in and do work. But if your coop maybe isn't that large, you know, you want to make sure that, you know, sometimes you might come up with some people will use like 5-gallon buckets for nest boxes. They'll have freestanding nest boxes. You just want to make sure that they're solid and sturdy. They're not going to wobble around, because if they move, the chicken doesn't feel comfortable in them. She's not going to want to go in there and use them, and so that can be a challenge. Yeah, and you know, we like to, about one nest box for every 4 to 5 chickens is a good number to have for those birds. And then, you know, like AJ said, we use the 2x4s for perches. Those
Sure.
work well. You know, some people will use actual branches for that. You know, kind of the bigger the branch it is, the better off it's going to be. Gives them something to grip on.
Other than that, in the coop, we are lucky enough to have electric in our coop. So in the wintertime, if we want to keep those daylight links longer, we can install a light on a timer. We don't use that electric for heat or anything like we said earlier, but in case we needed a light, that's what we would put in there.
And it does work out well for the heaters for the waters.
Definitely.
If we want to keep those that provide some electricity, and if you're going to do some cleaning, having some electricity might be helpful as well. And then too, if you have nest boxes, especially ones that are attached to the coops, it's always good to have the access on the outside so that you can get to the eggs. So we'll step over to this coop and take a look at the nest box. So here we have the nest box. So you'll notice we have clips on them. That these are predator-proof clips. So they're just not hook and eye loops. They're something where we can actually a little more, so they're kind of predator-proof. It's much harder for those raccoons and stuff to pop those open. But we have it open up so that we can just reach inside, grab the eggs.
Right.
How often do you collect eggs?
So we collect them once a day. In the heat of the summer, we'll collect twice a day sometimes, because we don't want those eggs setting out in the 100-degree weather here in Missouri. So
right, that's good. And too, like when it gets cold outside too, collecting a little more often might help to keep them from freezing.
Those sub-zero temperature days, we had some frozen eggs. So yeah, multiple times collecting would be good.
Right. So it's nice, you can get there, you can get the eggs, and then you can close that up and keep that predator proofing. So, you know, just things that make your life a little easier.
Right. Not having to step inside that coop every time to get eggs makes collecting a lot faster.
Yeah. So how often do you kind of clean out the...
Sure. So, like I said, it's bedded with pine shavings. We clean that at least once a month. So it kind of depends on how many chickens you've got in your coop. You need to make sure it always stays dry. That's one of the main things. So we do it about on a monthly basis.
All right.
Yep.
That works. And two, if you want to, you know, a lot of times people will do kind of deep cleanings. You know, maybe in the springtime is always a good time to do that, kind of after you've dealt with all of the winter stuff, and when it's harder to clean during the winter months, you can come in, use a lot of times you can use a bleach solution.
Right. We come in here with a pressure washer actually, and we'll pressure wash the whole thing, and then we'll use a bleach solution to sanitize, and then rebed it and get it dry again.
Yeah, so roughly it's about 1 part bleach to 10 parts water is a good kind of blend to help kind of sanitize everything. I think that, you know, and then too, you can see on the doors, you know, we've got locks on the doors up here to kind of keep the chickens in as much as possible. We do have, on this coop, we do have 2 sets of doors, one that's gonna allow for airflow, and then if it does get really cold outside, we've got this where we can close it up. And then again, we've got latches on that so that the birds stay in and hopefully everything else stays out.
Exactly.
All right, I think that about covers, well, and then we've got the roof. We've got ventilation, so we want to make sure the ventilation up
Sure.
at the top.
So if you look over here, there's vents on either end of this coop. So in the wintertime, those vents always stay open. I mean, they're open during the summer also, but in the winter, it's important to still keep some airflow. Otherwise, you're going to have ammonia build up inside there, and it's not healthy for your chickens. So we like to just keep those open. That way, it's not drafty, but you're still getting some airflow.
Right, and kind of, it's always kind of, there's no good answer as to how much ventilation is there. It's a lot of times you're looking at what's going on the inside of the coop. So, you know, if it's ammonia smell, you might also check with water. If you have condensation building up on the inside of the coop, that means there needs to be a little bit more airflow in there so it can open up. So you may have to, if you have a coop that has ventilation like that, you may have to play with it a little bit to find kind of where the right amount of airflow is.
We harp on trying to keep away those drafts, but sometimes we can seal up our chicken coops too much, and then we've got condensation inside.
All right. I think that about covers what we've got for the coop part. Let's wander out to the run area. Let's open this up so the birds get their airflow. I'll leave that there. We can come out to the coop. Again, first thing you see, you know, we've got this big area for the chickens to be in. Our welded wire everywhere. You know, we've got a door on the lock as well. You know, let's open it up. What are some of the things that are going on in here, AJ?
Sure. So you can see we keep our feeder and water outside. So that's probably one of the first things you notice. We just use a nipple water, so that's just a 5-gallon bucket that we've installed some chicken nipples on, and we just hang it by a chain from the roof of our run. And then we have a feeder that's also suspended from the ceiling that we keep raised at about the height of the back of our chickens. So if we keep it too low, they're going to waste a lot of feed, and if you get it too high, they're going to struggle to get feed. But we just try to keep it right at about their back level. Other than that, in there we've got gravel is what we use as our flooring in the run. It works pretty well for us. They still are able to scratch around. It stays fairly clean. We've tried some other things in there. We just can't get the drainage that we like, so the gravel seems to work best for us.
Right. And then how often do you have to kind of clean out this area? I think a lot of people, if you have a coop that's stationary, they wonder how much cleaning do I need to do kind of on the ground, the floor of this part?
We try to get the gravel cleaned out at least once a year. So it kind of, again, depends on how many chickens you've got in there building up feces. But once a year is our goal. And what we'll do is just come in there. There's a white gravel base below this creek gravel, and we'll scrape out all this gravel to that and replace it with new.
Right. So basically what you're creating is kind of a compost pile inside this run area, because, you know, ideally we want the birds to spend as much time as possible out here. They can make as much mess out here. We want to keep that coop area as clean as possible, because that's hopefully where the birds are laying the eggs. So we want to keep as much manure off of those eggs as possible, but they're going to come out here, they spend most of their time out here, even when it's 20 below zero, right? They're still going to be out here doing, you know, whatever it is, their chicken things on a regular basis. And you know, the feeders are, how much, what do they hold about?
Those hold about 35 pounds or so.
35 pounds, yeah. So, you know, chickens aren't meal eaters. They're going to graze throughout the day. And, you know, it's critical when it gets cold outside that they always have access to feed. So, you know, putting out, you know, a quarter pound of food a day for your chicken, and that's what she gets to eat that day, may not be the best approach. So just as much feed as out there as possible. Try not to let that run empty. They're going to eat and drink. They typically don't overeat, so that shouldn't be a concern for you. What else have we got?
Another thing with the run, we have a roof on our run, so that provides a little protection from the rain, the sun, and then speaking of the sun, we've got a shade cloth that we have on the west side of our run, so that way the evening sun doesn't bear down inside the chicken run.
Right, and then two, you can think about as it does get colder, as we move back into those colder months, if you want to cut down the amount of wind. Obviously outside they're going to be exposed a little more, but some people will put tarps up around the outside run area. Put it kind of on the side that typically gets the wind. Maybe it's two sides, and we don't want to completely close them off. We still want some airflow to go through there, and target down low, because that's where the birds are. They're on the floor. So, focus on cutting down that draft down towards the bottom of the ground. Out in the run area, you can also put things like dust baths you can put out there. You can put enrichment items, toys and things for them to play with. What else?
If you were to use a flock block, you'd want that outside, obviously.
Yeah.
I mentioned that we have our feeder and water outside. One reason we don't put it inside, obviously we've got a roof over our run, but keeping that water outside keeps the inside very dry, clean. Same with the feed. And if you get it inside, it gets a little cramped in there. You're getting it too close to the roost, and wherever they roost, they're obviously going to poop. So a lot of times that falls into the feeder or the water. So we like ours outside. It stays a lot cleaner.
So AJ, how do we kind of make it easier for the chickens to get from the coop to the run? Because I think we see here the coop sits up a little bit higher than the run.
Exactly, yeah. So we've got a ramp actually that goes into our coop, and each of the ramp has little treads on it, so that it's not slippery or anything like that. You can do multiple things. You can make a step. We like the ramp just because they can trot right up there.
Right, and the ramp's pretty simple. It's just one piece of wood that's got a couple little treads on it for them to pick up.
We just don't want that door to be too high to where they have to fly in there.
Yeah, if you wanted to get creative and make stairs, you could probably do that. If you just want to use bricks, that would work as well. So there's certainly lots of options for those, and you can see the doors. So we actually have doors on both sides of the coop. We actually have a sliding door that we can control from the outside if we need to, that will slide down on the inside of the coop. And then there's a door here on the outside of the coop that we can close as well. So we've got a couple doors there. So lots of protection. So it's really, people decide what works best, whether some people will close those doors at night to keep the birds in there and hopefully if a predator does manage to get in, just another added level of protection for those birds. That's really up to you to decide kind of what works best, whether you close the door or not. All right. And then with what are we doing to kind of predator proof these? What are some tips when it comes to predator proofing?
So we have a barrier below the gravel, about 6 inches below the ground here. We've got more of this hardware cloth that comes out another 12 inches. And that way, if a predator was trying to dig to get underneath and into your chicken coop, he runs into that wire, and then that stops him.
Right. So that's great. It's going to keep the things that dig. It might also help with snakes that are going to tunnel under there as well.
Exactly.
And then
dogs, anything.
Dogs. And two, you might also think, where should you be placing this? Sometimes you might, maybe you don't just have chickens, maybe you've got other animals.
Right.
Because your chickens are contained in here, if you've got horses and you've got, a pasture for your horse, you could certainly set this inside that. Or if you've got goats or other animals, you could kind of incorporate the goat run area around the outside of the chicken coop. So
certainly,
if you do have other animals, it's nice because the birds are contained. You can kind of put them inside that larger space for some of your other animals are in.
You might not want to put it right next to your dog kennel if you have an outside dog pen, just so that both aren't driving each other crazy the whole time.
Right. What else have we got?
We have touched on just about everything, I think.
Yeah. We talked about cleaning. Maintenance. What kind of maintenance work do we need to think about?
There is a little bit of maintenance that goes with your coop. You just got to make sure that you keep it structurally sound, is what I would say. So use a good hardy material whenever you're building it, and if something falls apart, don't wait, fix it, because you're going to regret it later. Whenever we built these, if there's anything that I would change, there's a couple things, but one was I would make this run taller, because obviously it's shorter than us, so every time you walk in here, you're likely to bump your head or you're always hunched over when you're cleaning in there. Another thing, it would be the nest boxes. I wish they were up above the roost.
Okay.
Just because there's more chance of them getting feces down in there that way.
Right.
So.
Yeah, but and I guess too, maybe even with the roosts, notice that they're perpendicular to the
Right.
nest boxes, so that
does
hopefully if the birds are, when they do kind of wake up in the morning and
Yeah.
empty out, they're
Yeah.
not emptying out right into the nest boxes. So
Sure.
that's a good thing. You can add perches. People will make kind of frames that they build perches. You can put things for jump up. Some people might even build a loft to kind of
Yep.
for more space for the birds to get into. There's all sorts of things, creative things you can do. If you're handy enough to build something like this, then certainly making it large enough for you to get inside is certainly going to make the cleaning easier. A lot of the coops that you're buying kind of pre-built tend to be smaller, and
Yes.
you're kind of on your hands and knees getting inside of things. And
Anything you can do to make it easier on yourself
Right.
is going to be better for you and the chickens, because you're going to be more apt to keep it clean.
Right. I think that about wraps up what we've got to talk about on this episode of Livin' the Farm Life. We talked about coop management design, for Dr. Patrick Biggs.
And AJ Lee?
Thanks for joining us. If you do have more questions, you want to learn more about coop design and chickens in general, go down to your local Purina dealer and they'll be happy to answer more questions for you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Livin' the Farm Life. Watch for future programs played the third Wednesday of the month we air at 5 p.m. Central Time. And as always, reach out to your local Purina dealer or purinamills.com for additional help and resources. So until next time, enjoy your farm.